What you're about to experience is one man's quest to see beyond the tumultuous period we're in and to envision what lies just beyond our grasp, yet well within our reach. Welcome to Larry Rifkin's America Trends, where the future has arrived, and it's just in time.
It's time, once again, for AmericaTrendsPodcast.com. Thank you so much for coming by today. John and I are so pleased at the growth of our audience and the fact that you seem to like the types of content that we're developing. And John, you know, we don't have a science to all of this. We think about trends. We think about what the future looks like. We think about topics that are far and wide. And we just hope that they meet somebody's need.
Well, judging from the numbers, I think we got a lot of loyal listeners out there.
Absolutely. And we love it because not only do we have visitors, but we see how many visits. So that means if you're driving in one morning and you're listening to us and you don't have time to finish, you really are still interested in coming back to us later on. It's almost like with Netflix, you can do that. Yeah. And they know exactly where you stopped. So you never have to think again, wait a minute, was I on episode 3, 32 minutes and 47 seconds in? And I don't know if our technology does that, John, because I listen all the way through.
But you can binge us.
But do look at the marker. I mean, if you see that you stopped at 32 minutes and you've got to get in because your boss is waiting to have one of those sit-downs at the beginning of the day. So you got to say, okay, I'm coming back and I'm going to fast forward to 32 minutes in. Well, you can get us on iTunes and Stitcher. You get us at AmericaTrendsPodcast.com. And all the numbers have been going up. And so we're really thrilled about that.
We're happy.
We really are.
Happy, yes.
But then again, you and I are very loyal to each other, John, and to Scott Phillips. We got to mention Scott.
Scott is doing a good job.
He's our social media designer. And look for us at Trends Podcast on Twitter and Facebook, and he does such a great job. But we have loyalty here. I mean, we are committed to each other. We really are.
Or should be committed.
Well, we took that blood oath. I don't know. I bled at one point. I don't know. Did you?
I'm bleeding from my basement. But
that's right. You're still working on
that. That's another thing.
But, you know, we like to think that over there, and I'm pointing over there, outside of our country, that lots of people work in these, very inhospitable conditions. And we talk about them. Remember Kathy Lee and some of her clothing, and we talk about these sweatshops, and they've got all these terrible working conditions, below subsistence wages. People are exploited, they're downtrodden, and they're at the mercy of a boss who really doesn't care about their well-being. And we think about that over there.
Yeah, but it's over here. I mean, how many Americans don't take vacations because they're worried about their job?
Well, we're the worst at that.
Yeah.
And people feel very insecure in their working environments today. And that's unfortunate. They have to always be looking over your shoulder. You have to have your phone affixed to you. You can never really take a vacation that is truly a vacation.
Right.
Or you feel guilty saying that.
Right, absolutely. It's just wrong all the way around. But I don't know what's going on with the companies out there. It used to feel like you worked for a company and, you know, they appreciated you. But now it's changed, I think.
Now, look, let's not over-dramatize this in the sense that in America, I mean, there are places that do step outside of the norm, but we generally don't have people working in 100-degree heat, no ventilation, 14-hour day. I mean, we don't generally, but we have a lot of people who are being put upon because of competition, automation, outsourcing, and because shareholders somehow have risen way above everybody else in terms of the pecking order, in terms of what companies think about.
You're absolutely right. And I also think that there's so many people looking for work that you're kind of dispensable as a, you know, so you could lose your job any day because they can find somebody cheaper to do your job, you know, I don't know.
And you think about it, John, at the beginning of the century, there are many books and novels that were written, Steinbeck, Upton Sinclair, and others, about the terrible working conditions in America. And they were bad. But then there was a period after World War II, and a lot of it had to do with what you were saying, where they needed workers. And so they began to develop, these good packages of benefits.
Absolutely.
And they began to care about us a little bit more. And I don't think we were making this up. I mean, our parents began to be able to build middle-class lives because they had a job that was sustainable and that had the right package of benefits. And so there was a period, this about 30 to 40-year period, where really things got better for the American worker. But I would argue, John, after reading this book, The End of Loyalty, that in fact that was just a short period in our history. That was not the norm historically.
Okay, well, all right.
I mean, if you go back to the 1800s, you go back to the early 20th century, you look at what goes on overseas, generally the worker is really not given a lot of consideration.
No, you're right. And I guess we're getting back to that. We had a golden age.
Yes.
A golden age of work.
And that went by rather quickly. Rick Wartzman is going to be joining us in just a moment. And the book that he's written, The End of Loyalty. And so he looked at some of our great companies going back. He looked at General Electric before Neutron Jack.
They were huge, yeah.
Then General Motors.
Yeah.
They were very good to their workers for a period of time. Kodak. They were so good to their workers that they cared more about their workers and their film, and they ended up going out of business.
Yeah, they were kind of short-sighted.
Yeah, but they had these engineers whom they loved, and they said, well, film's the thing, and we're building better chemicals and better film, and then they didn't realize that people wanted memories. They didn't care how they got them.
Right.
So, oops. Well, Coca-Cola. He looks at these four companies as examples of companies that really became part of the family. And we had that here in Waterbury, Connecticut, where we are emanating from, where we had companies like Scoville and Anaconda and American Brass, and people were able to build a middle-class life. Now, there were environmental things that as we look back, how did we let that go on?
Right.
And that left people with a legacy of medical and health issues. But they were able to build a middle-class life.
Right, but the other thing is they worked for these companies for 30, 40 years sometimes. I mean, there was loyalty on both sides. So.
And the expectation going in was that I'm going to be here until I retire.
Right.
Today, how many people really have that expectation?
No, they jump jobs weekly, a lot of people.
And a lot of the young people, I mean, they're looking for a 2-year stint, and then they're moving on. So this book talks about this happy and fat time when American companies were sharing the wealth with their workers and giving these heaping portions of health benefits, pensions, and the like. And why are we looking back at that? Well, we're looking back at that to see when did that begin to erode, and what's the impact today when we don't have that?
Well, you can see the impact of that today. I mean, that's the question is, what's it going to be in the future? How are we going to fix this?
And one of the things is that I don't think you and I thought about a lot until Rick Wartzman brought this up, but you do think about some of the fights that we're having about what is the responsibility of government today. What do we want from them? And we even talked about universal basic income, and Mark Zuckerberg wants that. I just read, by the way, where another mogul, the guy who developed, what's that airline that was from Britain? The one that
Virgin?
Virgin,
what's
yeah.
the guy's name?
Yeah, you know who I mean.
Yeah, I know.
Yeah, he wants that too. But the point is that now, I know a lot of people think government's role is expanded inordinately, but in many ways, they're just responding to the fact that there are a lot of people out in our society who used to have a very comfortable, warm, supportive environment in which they worked. And today, they have shredded that safety net within the private sector. So now they're turning to the public sector looking for help.
Right. And then they're seeing the people that are in the government sector still getting good benefits and stuff and saying, hey, what's going on here?
Exactly. So now there's a little bit of a rub between the private worker, only 7% of whom, or 6%, are actually organized. And then you've got the public sector where many, many more, at least in many parts of the country. So there's a lot of tension as a result of the end of loyalty. And Rick Wartzman is going to help us through this. And I think he really tells an incredible story. He's with the Drucker Institute, and we've all heard of Peter Drucker and great management organizational skills that are taught by the Peter Drucker Group. And so why don't we listen to Rick right now?
Let's do that.
Okay. Well, again, the book is called The End of Loyalty, and Rick Wartzman is with us. Rick, when we think about loyalty, employer to employee, has it had a long and difficult history over time, or are we to think that things were much better and they're now cascading downhill?
Well, it depends where your starting point is. You know, in the long history, I mean, even in American history, right? Most people worked on farms for a long time, and you know, may have been small craftspeople and that kinds of things. I mean, there weren't big employers until the Industrial Revolution. And, you know, even in the early stages of factory work, a lot of the pieces and components were sort of done off-site and then brought in. But there was a point when things began to be rationalized under one roof, and, you know, there was a more formal relationship established between employer and employee. It began with something of a drive system. It was pretty, you know, brutal for employees in factories to work. But over time, there were more and more employers who, for a variety of impulses, began to pay their workers better, give them all kinds of benefits, including health insurance and pensions. Some of these things were hard-won by unions, but a lot of this would shake out and reach its apex in this 30-year stretch after World War II, from really the late 40s, mid to late 40s, up until the early 70s. And then, yes, we've been in a steady decline